This is TWiT.
Well, since I happen to be in Redmond at an event, I receive booze. It's part of my life, kind of an unavoidable thing. A friend of mine gave me a bottle of Bushmills 21, which I should have brought with me, but I forgot it. It's sitting in the hotel room. Sorry. And I've never talked about Bushmills before, except adjacently in our conversations about Irish whiskey, that original Irish whiskey conversation we talked about. I ended with the Redbreast 12, which is one of my very, very favorites. Arguably, Bushmills is the oldest distillery on the planet. There are evidences of distilling going on there starting in 1608. Now, it's in the area today was known as Northern Ireland, but in 1608, that was not a thing. They predate all of that. And so not far from Belfast. They got the Bushmill name in 1784, and that is a derivative of the barley mills that they had and the Bush River, which is where they get the water to make their whiskey. How famous is Bushmills? It is referenced by James Joyce in his epic Ulysses, and apparently he was a fan. So this is old school whiskey, like in the ultimate degree. And in 2008, on the 400th anniversary, the Bank of Ireland printed banknotes with the Bushmills distillery on it.
God bless the Irish. That is amazing.
It is badass. 400 years, right? And then much longer. It's longer now. It's been 400 and something. They make a lot of different whiskey. They, for whatever you prefer, they make a blend. This is still the Irish process, and if the rules for Irish are a little bit different than the rules for Scottish whiskey. Obviously, it needs to be made in Ireland, although they recognize both Northern Ireland, which is part of the UK, and the Republic of Ireland as being Ireland. They don't require only barley. In fact, many Irish whiskeys are made with a blend of grains, different malted cereals. Sometimes you see rye, sometimes you see wheat, sometimes you see corn. They kind of go which way they want. They are not concerned about using strictly malting for the enzymes. You can do saccharification, which is the introductions of diastase and other enzymes to allow the malts the grains to turn to sugar. They use yeast fermentation. They do not require a specific number of distillations. Column stills are allowed as well as pot stills. Often Irish whiskey is triple distilled. They allow a maximum distillation level of 94.8%, which is very, very high for most product that you'd be calling whiskey. That's in vodka territory. And most people don't distill quite that high. They do allow for caramel color. They require a minimum of 3 years of barreling, and you have to be 40% above ABV to be declared a whiskey. They do define different categories of whiskey in the Irish world. And Scottish is really, just the single malts and the blends, but in Irish they have single pot still, single malt, and single grain, as well as blending as particular kinds. And of course, if there's an age statement on the bottle, that's the youngest thing that's in the bottle. This particular version of Bushmills, and I would call it its premier product. The 21 is about as high as you're going to go from Bushmills. And it's 100% malted Irish barley, as opposed to some other Bushmills that do blends of grains. They do a triple distillation, pot still only. And then, of course, because it's all barley, they need to manage the sulfurs, which is why they use copper pot stills, because the copper chelates the sulfur out of the distillate, makes it a little milder. They do come off at the third distillation at a fairly high alcohol level. That exact number is not known, but they cut with water before going into the barrels. They do a split barreling for 19 years in both Sherry Oloroso casks and American bourbon casks. Those are then what they call married together. You'd call them pouring into a pot. And then they do a finishing casking 2 years in Portuguese Madeira casks. So Madeira is an island actually off the coast of Africa, but controlled by Portugal. And it's where Madeira wine comes from. And they have a handful of these barrels. It's just not that much Madeira. And so to get a Madeira finish is a pretty rare product. And it is extraordinarily good and priced appropriately at $250 US. So I have a good friend, obviously, although he he went to the distillery because he doesn't live far from there on his way to come here and pick up a bottle directly from the distillery, which is pretty cool.
Do I know this friend? This friend sounds familiar.
You could probably, I'm not going to name him, but you probably could figure out who he is.
Okay. Can I name him? Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's Bushmill, obviously.
It's Bushmills, yes. And
it's Bob Bushmill.
Yeah, I have in the past toured this distillery. It's beautiful and ancient. They do have a new distillery and the old distillery labeled accordingly, so you can kind of take a look at what they're doing there. But yeah, there's something about walking around on ground where they've been making spirits for 400 years.
That would be cool to see for sure.
Absolutely.